Welcome to the FarrCast, bringing you insights into Wall Street, Washington, and the world. And now for your special Thanksgiving edition, here's your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome to the FarrCast. Thank you so much for being with us again this week. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It is the 22nd day of November. 22nd day of November. We'll see light volumes on Wall Street today. They call this the junior varsity hour today and Friday. All the senior guys are not going to be there, so none of the junior guys want to take big positions. In fact, most are not allowed to take big positions. They don't have trading lines. You're not going to hear big opinions or anything, barring some crisis or existential crisis from around the world. Should be a quiet few days until we get to Monday of next week and post Black Friday and Cyber Monday results and all of that thing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of year, and we are just weeks away from 2024, if you can believe it. 6 weeks from today, we'll be in a brand new year. This one will be over with. Hadn't been a bad year at all. S&P 500, 45. It's over 45.50, over 45.55, something like that on the S&P 500. Huge. Dow's over 35,000. Did you know that? And the U.S. Treasury, which has the 10-year, which has gone higher, has pulled back off of those highs. This isn't a bit of a rally now, and maybe the Fed's over and done with. We predicted that at the beginning of the year, that the Fed would be done by the end of the year. That's one of my predictions that came true. Very few of the others came true yet. It's a great thing about predictions. Just give me enough time, ladies and gentlemen. So when I look for predictions and trying to figure out this year and next year, I'm going to come out with my top 10 stocks. They've actually done pretty well this year relative to the broad market. They've done pretty well. They've lagged, but they've kept up okay. My top 10. We're going to come up with next year's top 10 coming up. When I want to understand it all, my friend Jim Lebenthal from Cerity Partners, CNBC contributor, has been leaning into the bearish breaths of Wall Street, the stinky bearish breaths of Wall Street, and he has been bullish and he has been right. And he's been right long enough that they've named him Jimmy the Bull on the halftime report, which probably means Jimmy's ready to change his opinion now that they've given him a new title. Jim Lebenthal, welcome back.
Michael, you always make me laugh with your intros, but you also make me feel very good about myself. Thank you for that. How are you?
Jim, I am just great. You deserve to feel good about yourself. These folks were pounding the hell out of you for months, and it was very hard on you when folks are coming after you day by day, relentlessly pounding, and you stuck to your guns. God bless you.
Thank you. You know, I may surprise you a little bit today by throwing an accolade or two to the Bears, because I start to kind of see what their point is. Let me not scare your audience. I'm not going to embrace the bear thesis.
Gee, Christmas.
Yeah. No, but it's an interesting time. Yes, things have gone a lot better than certainly people expected a year ago at this time. And by the way, side note, remember all the people who had 100% certainty in their models that there would be a recession this year.
Yes.
Folks, if you ever hear anyone speak about the future with 100% certainty, it is do not walk, run the other way. It's an obvious red flag. But, here we are. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way, Michael, Harry, yes, all the audience. And here we are at the end of the year. And I think those lagged effects of the Fed are starting to show up, Michael. And I'm looking at Deere's earnings report today. They're reducing their guidance for the coming year. I'm thinking about Cisco's earnings last week. They reduced their guidance for the coming year. And I think it's logical to expect that 525 basis points of rate hikes would have an effect. Now the question is, how much of an effect? And my point in all of this is that the Fed clearly, to me, is moving to the sidelines. Inflation supports that. And if they are moving to the sidelines, that's going to give a lot of room for whatever this slowdown is, and I don't think it's going to be a recession, to be short and sweet. So I would not be surprised to see those cyclical sectors that are now reporting lousy guidance actually start to rally on the perception that the news is out there and it ain't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, I think that you're correct. I mean, I have been continuing to look for this slowdown. I'm still looking for the slowdown. The inversion on the 10 to 2s is now back up to 50 basis points. This has been the longest inversion. It's to see the yield curve with a negative slope for this long is something none of us have ever seen in our careers, not for this long. And it was long coming too. We watched it for months on the FarrCast, going from 50 basis points, 30 basis points, 20 basis points positive curve. And then it didn't go sharply negative. It just kind of lulled into that negative phase. So a bit of a slowdown, according to the technical numbers, still makes sense. Will it be more? Will it be less? I tend to say, Jim, when you start one of these slowdowns and everybody says it's going to be mild, that's like everybody telling you they're 100% certain. You hope it's going to be mild, but once they start, you really never know. And I understand where the supports look like they're in place and why it should be mild. But I really do like your point that it's probably time to look at some of the things that haven't moved and that have been out of favor. What industry groups would you look at now, perhaps out of favor? And I'm going to start with one. I'm going to start with some of the healthcare and maybe some of the pharmaceuticals that don't have the GLP-1 drugs. They have gotten
down.
Huh?
Boy, they've been beaten down.
Oh, they look like hell. And everybody hates them, and they're down 35%, and they're at all-time lows for the years. And these are blue chip pharmaceutical companies. Are they going to go out of business? I don't think they're going out of business, and nobody likes them. So maybe that's where you begin to buy and nibble and say, geez, if I've got cash, here's something. See, I think about it this way. Here's something, if I could buy it at this kind of a discount, I can own that for 5 or 10 years. How do you look at it, Jim?
I like where your head is. I'm going to leapfrog in a second to where I see bigger gains, but I like where your head is. It's a sector that's been beaten down. A lot of these stocks are trading at single-digit multiples with dividend yields of 3 to 4%. The latter of which gives you plenty of time to just sit there and wait and let those multiples expand and consider a stock. I don't know. I'm going to pick Bristol Myers. I think it's trading at 8 times earnings.
This is just an example. This is not a recommendation to buy or sell. Just an example to use for some numbers. Yes.
Yep. Just reporting the facts. I think it's trading at 8 times. I think it's got about a 4% dividend yield. You know, what if it goes to 10 times over the next 12, 18, 24 months? That's a 25% return plus that 4% dividend. I mean, that seems easy. The one thing I do want to push back or add a degree of caution on these pharmaceuticals is I think one of the things that's held them back over the last year is the Inflation Reduction Act from 2 summers ago. That got the camel's nose under the tent, so to speak, with regards to drug pricing from Medicare and Medicaid. And I think that even though it's only 10 drugs so far, and we haven't seen the results of those negotiations, I think people are worried that that's going to cut into profits down the line. Personally, I don't believe that. Because what you will see if the negotiations result in too draconian of pricing is that innovation goes to zero. You need those profits in which to develop new drugs. But Michael, I don't want to get too stuck on that particular rabbit hole, because I agree with the landscape in which you are living, which is to say healthcare is a good place to look. But I'll also suggest to you that similar valuation metrics can be found in energy, materials, financials, industrials. And that's a pretty broad spectrum I just listed. But why don't we focus on financials for a second? You know, a lot of these stocks trading at close to book value, single-digit multiples, and again, good dividend yields. And when I think about the path forward, again, even if I embrace a little bit of what the bears are saying, that there's going to be a slowdown, how do we think the economy is going to look in April? I think it's going to look pretty good. And April's not that far away. And if you don't want to say April, say May or June. I think things are going to look pretty good. And as the economy starts to expand again, you're going to need financing. You're going to see bond issuance. You're going to see the deal calendar open up. You're going to see M&A. All of these things that, again, may take an 8 times multiple stock, I don't care if it's Goldman, Citigroup, whatever it is, and push it to 10. That's going to be a very nice return. And it'll happen suddenly. It'll happen suddenly. And I think you want to be positioned in financials for that.
Well, Jim, if things go down a bit and are soft, that doesn't suggest that the Fed immediately starts to ease. So rates would stay consistent under that scenario of a very soft kind of a slowdown that doesn't compel the Fed to action, does it? I don't think so.
You know, you and I both know we actually don't want the Fed to ease.
No, we don't want the Fed to ease. So you agree with me, with a softer kind of a scenario, the Fed stays on the sidelines. How long can they keep a 5.25% Fed funds rate if inflation really comes down? And at what point does that 5.25 rate really become a more significant headwind if inflation begins to go away? All of a sudden, you get a 3% real rate return. That they got to come down sometime if it really is a soft landing. So how do they get there?
Well, if the soft landing occurs, and let's not use the 2% target, which is the target, but let's just say that the CPI headline gets to 2.5, 2.7, and you've got the Fed funds rate in the middle at 5.375. That's an awfully restrictive. That's an awfully restrictive real rate for sub 3% inflation. So by the end of the year, does the Fed cut a couple of times? Not because the economy is easing, but just because they're too restrictive for a sub 3% CPI, which you're likely to get in the next few months. But on that note, I just want to point out, look at freight costs. Look at what, I forget if it was Walmart or Lowe's or whomever, but the retailers are kind of explicitly telling you that goods deflation is here. Yep. So, wages, okay, there's still a little bit of a problem, but it's pretty likely that inflation was transitory and, the Fed just couldn't wait that long. I get that. But the point being is that inflation is coming down, and that may be the reason that the Fed cuts rates.
I think at some point they're going to have to. Folks, let me just walk through one thing and connect a couple of dots here. If our interest rates at some point do go a bit lower, then the rest of the world is not as eager to buy our bonds because we're offering a bit of a lower return. That likely is one of the reasons you've seen the dollar fall lately. People aren't buying dollars as much lately. There's not quite this huge demand for dollars, so the dollar has fallen a bit, gotten a little bit weaker. And then that supports the idea that our commodity prices that Jim was talking about go a little bit higher. Also, interest rate sensitive stocks like utilities, when interest rates come down, if indeed they do drift lower, and perhaps we've seen the highs, they will respond very favorably by comparison during a falling rate environment. So there is a consistent thread supporting what Jim is suggesting may or may not happen. Jim, give me a few words for Thanksgiving here and what you're thinking. We're going to have you back, of course, before the end of the year.
Before we go, I have to address the ground ball that you hit to me earlier and which I let go into the outfield. And that was this idea of, will a slowdown or a recession be short and sweet? I want to make the case that it will be. And first off, I point to employment. I mean, we had a scare with initial weekly jobless claims last week. That just reversed. They're back down, close to their lows, so not worried about that. But I think the issue is there is no major source of imbalance in the economy or markets. There isn't the housing boom of 2005 through 2007. There isn't the tech telecom boom of the late 1990s. Even the crypto, NFT, SPAC, meme stock thing got it out of its system 2 years ago. So in terms of the need for a cleansing big slowdown, big recession, I just don't see the reason for it. And again, if I give thanks, first off, I'm so grateful to you, my friend, Harry, who's behind the scenes, also my friend. Your presence in my life is a blessing. But if I give gratitude to the most important thing in the markets, it's that people are employed. The labor market is strong. Folks, I'm going to leave it at that. That is the most important thing.
Jim Lebenthal is a partner at Cerity Partners. We're very grateful for you, too, and for our friendship. At the end of the day, they say you can tell where a man's heart is by where his treasure is. And the one thing that my good dear friends Jim and Harry and I share is that our treasure is our friendships. We have other treasure, and that's not it, folks. That's not it. You might not believe us, but I promise this is what we care about most. So happy Thanksgiving to you, Jim. Hey, Bill Horvatin, are you? I hope you're listening this week, because we're getting to sectors and stocks, because we get listener email that asks us to get a little bit more away from the Fed, Jim, and get back into a little bit more investing. You do that so well for us every week. Thank you, Jim.
My pleasure. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
We'll be right back with Dan Mahaffee, and then a segment from Farr, what I'm thankful for and what I'm thinking about. And it'll be brief, segment 3, when we come back on the FarrCast.
Thank you for joining us this week on the FarrCast. Now it's time for political analyst Dan Mahaffee and your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back. Joining us now, as he does every week, now in season 7 for the FarrCast, covering Wall Street, Washington, and the world, Dan Mahaffee from the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress, our senior political analyst on the FarrCast. Hey, welcome back, Dan.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving early.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Yes, we're having a Thanksgiving show. I have my Thanksgiving message coming up in segment 3 right after that. Dan, as we get started this week, I want us to take a little bit of a different take. We're certainly going to cover Washington and the world, as we always do with you. But I'd like to talk about some of the common misconceptions about which everyone seems to be able to get so angry, even though they seem to be so misguided. I remember a political race in the 60s, or 70s, where there was a female candidate, and her opponent said, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I happen to know for a fact that when she was in college, this woman was a practicing thespian, which of course means actor, actress. But that tilted all of the polls, and that woman did not get elected because she had been painted with an accurate term, just appealed to those folks who didn't want actors, apparently. Dan, there's some huge percentage of the American public that can't name the 3 branches of government. And all of these folks here in the U.S. get very upset about a lot of things that, when you scratch the surface, but barely scratch the surface, you find out they really don't know what the hell they're talking about. How much, when the old saying, you can't underestimate the intelligence or the stupidity, I guess, of the American voting public. How does this play? How do we educate our voting public? Talk to me about some of the misconceptions. Where do you think voters are missing things now? And I want to talk, as we move forward here, specifically about the perceptions about President Biden's age, how he's getting no credit really for a pretty darn good economy, why the issue of abortion is still the number one issue, ladies and gentlemen, when you poll voters as to what's going to sway their vote one way or the other. And how is it that Donald Trump keeps improving in the polls as each legal charge seems to continue?
Well, yeah, certainly where to start. This is like a Thanksgiving feast. Where to dig in? I would say, look, as you say,
well, if we're starting with dumb, we've got a lot of that.
Yeah, Americans don't know. Yeah, 34% of Americans don't know the 3 branches of government.
34% don't know the 3 branches.
So you don't know the 3 branches of government. We talk, and look, what is it, the Churchill quote I'll butcher, that nothing will turn you off from democracy like a conversation with the average voter. Yes. You have those examples, and you see it in articles and focus groups. A woman saying, "I'm angry about Joe Biden. I voted for him, but this abortion decision happened while he was president, and I don't know if I can support him again for letting that happen. And again, this person has no idea how courts, separation of powers, the nature of the Supreme Court, or even the basis of the legal decision itself work. I think you also have the, you mentioned Biden and the economy.
So stop for 1 second.
Sure.
There is nothing, just as a point of fact, there is nothing, not one thing that Joe Biden could have done to change that decision one way or the other about Roe versus Wade made by the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Right. Look, other than if he was able to convince Ruth Bader Ginsburg to retire when he was vice president during the Obama administration, no, there is no way, short of a time machine, that he could have done anything about this.
Okay, so basically that says that the president, doesn't matter who the president is, has no influence, zero, over the outcome and vote of any Supreme Court decision, including R. v. Wade.
The separation of powers. So then you have the economy. And look, this is a problem, I think, of the White House's own communication. When politicians are speaking in second and third derivatives, let's not get too calculus-y. When you say things like the rate of inflation is slowing, that doesn't mean anything to the person at the store seeing the prices continuing to go up. And
right.
That's where you see it again with the voters. And this is, you have the combination of civic illiteracy and economic innumeracy coming together when you have these trends among the public.
Do that again. Civic illiteracy. I love it when you use these big words. Civic
illiteracy and economic innumeracy.
And economic innumeracy. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
And then what you have is this belief that the president somehow has this ability, or even Congress, that there's some big lever in Washington we have that's controlling gas prices. And, just suddenly we decide, screw you and your SUVs, and we're gonna jank it up and down. No, that's not how the economy works. That's not, again, how inflation works. But again, the White House communicating these things, again, where the rate of inflation or these other matters, folks are simply caring about prices. But the White House doesn't really have that much control over the day-to-day economy. Again, we'll separate that from the discussion we had about the giant spending packages that were already passed, but the president now does not have much authority over what he can do on prices in the economy right now. And as a matter of fact, and this is a problem, I think, for this White House, U.S. oil and gas production at its highest in history.
Gas prices are as low as they've been right now for Thanksgiving weekend. And the president's getting no credit, though he gets all the blame. How could Biden let gas prices go so high? Really? Gasoline. We've got petroleum as a global commodity. And you think Joe Biden, you think that one guy in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is going to control the price of that commodity? What's he supposed to do about it?
And sure, you're going to talk to an oil man who will turn around and tell you that, Biden's let the price of oil go too low and now we're not having production, rather than an oil man just telling you he does not like Democrats.
Well, he doesn't like Democrats, and he doesn't, they're trying to make profits, and you've got Saudi Arabia who wants to cut production so they keep the price high, but they manipulate it as best they can. But Joe Biden.
So MBS has a lot more to do with the price of oil in OPEC than the president.
Yes, absolutely. Of course. I remember walking down the street. This was when I was on TV several times a week, and I used to get recognized walking down the street. And this woman stopped me, and I was with a friend of mine. She said, "Oh, Mr. Farr, I watch you. I love you on CNBC. You're just the best. And you're from Washington, and these people are awful." President Obama was in office at the time. And she said, "And this President Obama is the least effective president we have ever had, ever." And I don't know, don't you agree he's just the worst, least effective president we've ever had? I said, "Oh, no, ma'am. No, ma'am." "What?" And I could see her getting angry before I finished the sentence. I said, I think probably the reason you're upset about President Obama is because he's very effective. President Obama is actually getting a lot done. You just don't like it. So whether he's the best or the worst, we can talk about, but you can't say he's ineffective. And she blew her top. "I used to like you. I can't believe you'd say that President Obama was effective. we're never going to watch CNBC again. And I was like, oh, good. But I honest to God, my jaw was hanging open. I mean, is English, I think, was her first language too.
And I think that's also, again, what makes a president effective is more often the team around him and who he recruits than some of his individual characteristics. Now, don't get me wrong, presidential leadership and that nature and his management style, their management style is extremely important. But most often what the president's own personal skills come down to most are being able to communicate with the public and demonstrating rapport and friendships with foreign leaders, that kind of work. Really, when it comes to the management of government and the programs and the things we think about, that's the team of advisors. And perhaps, look, Biden's age is definitely going to be an issue, but it has forced him to create a stronger team. Look at the deal you see with, Secretary of State Blinken working around the region to get deals with the Hamas, to get this ceasefire and hostage deal taken care of. That doesn't happen when the president thinks he's the only one who can make the deal or has to be involved in every negotiation. Having that team around a president is also extremely important for accomplishments, and something most voters don't think about when they're just thinking, do I like my guy or the other guy?
Is that your subtle contrast between Biden and Trump? More of a team approach to a me approach?
Certainly. But it's also a difference in perhaps the first part of the Clinton administration versus the second part of the Clinton administration. You see this in all presidencies.
Yeah, and if you didn't like the Clinton administration, you're welcome to your opinion there. The one thing we had for a Clinton administration was a surplus. The country took in more money than it spent. And boy, I can't see that happening anytime soon. So the main issue of abortion
certainly
is big in this election, and it seems that the Republicans are being seen and judged as tone deaf here, very tone deaf, and it's going to hurt them. So you've got Biden's age hurting him, and they are losing young Democrats, and he's falling behind Trump in the polls. Mm-hmm. Does Trump distance himself from this issue of abortion? Does Biden back out? Is there a vice presidential candidate that makes the difference? Because people are coming up and going, Mr. Farr, it's Trump going to be president again? It looks like Trump's going to be president again.
Look, there's a very real chance of that. I think with Trump, the question becomes, how does he, as you say, you've seen him try to, in this abortion issue, he tries to carefully distance himself from it by saying, look, I delivered the Supreme Court that provided the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but I don't agree with how far some of those Republicans are going when they talk about changing the laws now. Because that's what we have to remember about the court decision. It did not ban abortion. It simply allowed states or others to write laws about it. It overturned a court-derived basis for abortion. And it's controversial, too, because it gets into how rights are determined through the 14th Amendment and the Constitution. But the court basically kicked it back to the states and certain measures of the federal government. And we even see it in the trouble Republicans are having right now in moving packages through Congress. These budget deals have actually failed, some of them, not budget proposals, because the far-right Republicans have tried to put abortion riders on there that the moderate Republicans do not want to vote for in an election year. So this is even inter-Republican party. They don't know the answer yet. Trump is trying to split the difference. And so far, the least tone deaf you have of any of the candidates on this issue, it appears to be Nikki Haley. So but then you contrast that with the Ohio legislators who, as you point out, just had that referendum in Ohio to put it in their constitution, and then the Republican legislators turn around and basically say, "Screw the voter." That's not going to work given the emotion of this issue, and it comes down to, you mentioned young people and Biden. Perhaps if this war calms down and there's a sense of those things calming down in the near future, that I think could help Biden with younger voters who are, as a generation, more war-weary than any other in many ways, having grown up under all this. But the other factors of abortion come down to, I think many voters would say, look, this guy's old, but rights and concerns about that go beyond presidencies.
Well, we'll watch all of this as people do and don't understand, and they make emotional decisions in the voting booth with imperfect information, maybe with not a lot of intellectual curiosity. I saw an interview on television that I thought was fascinating. There was a young man going around the pro-Hamas rallies on college campuses, asking folks who were there to sign a petition in support of Hamas. And he walked up to them and said, will you sign a petition in support of Palestine and Hamas? And everyone said yes. And he said, here are the tenets of Hamas. They want to kill all practicing homosexuals. They want to restrict women's rights to and they had a list. Do you know that list, Dan?
Certainly, yeah. You have all of it in here in the.
Go ahead. Tell me what they are.
Oh, well, there's plenty of articles here in it, but you have, of course, that women are to be kept at home, that the Jewish religion and Jews are responsible for all the wars and the documents like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and conspiracy texts. These are all in there. The Hamas legal code does, as you say, push against homosexual rights or minority rights. So people will support these things, but don't look at what's actually in the document of an organization that is a Muslim Brotherhood organization.
To the college kids' credit, those that were carrying the signs, when they looked at the tenets that they were being asked to support, not a one sign. They said,
a little education is a powerful tool. One of the things that to circle back to where we started, I think this is a good point. The Annenberg survey that gave you that data on not knowing the three branches of government found a significant impact in correct answers among those who took a basic civics course in the middle or junior high school.
Right.
Just having a little bit of knowledge about how the system works can go a long way. We've just not been, if you look at these campuses, we've not been doing it great with some folks.
Well, it does matter if you have the facts. And we hope on the FarrCast that we give you the facts, and we try to give you the facts without opinions. We hope that in this particular discussion, you haven't heard our opinions. Dan's is analysis of what he sees. Mine is financial and economic, lifelong Washingtonian with a pretty close seat and a lot of contact with a lot of these politicians, in fact, very senior politicians, to have personal conversations. And I hope I'm able to share those insights with you from time to time. So anyway, try to have a little bit more education and see what's at stake. But though we recognize these biases, though we recognize these prejudices, there's no indication they're going to change. And the frustration is that they will continue to drive results and outcomes in the upcoming elections and in public sentiment and in perhaps world and global support, or the lack thereof, of what happens in Hamas and what in Palestine and in Ukraine and in China and in Taiwan and in Washington, D.C. Dan Mahaffee is the Director of Policy for the Center of the Study of the Presidency and Congress, and our senior political analyst on the FarrCast. Happy Thanksgiving, Dan.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving, Michael. Time to analyze some turkey and stuffing here.
I'm going to do it. The Butterball hotline is open, folks. You can call them, and they'll tell you lots of things about turkeys that I still find a bit embarrassing. Please stay with me. We'll be right back.
Michael Farr and the FarrCast are proud to support Heroes, Inc. Heroes supports the spouses and children of law enforcement officers and firefighters who gave their lives in the line of duty to the greater Washington, D.C. community. Their singular goal is to honor the supreme sacrifice made by these individuals by caring for their families. Heroes' work begins within 24 hours of the tragic loss and continues indefinitely. We invite you to learn more about Heroes' mission at heroes.org. We hope that you will consider supporting Heroes as they endeavor to honor those who protect us. That's heroes.org. Heroes, here for you, here for good. And now, back to the FarrCast and your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back. Two great segments, my friend Jim Lebenthal and my great friend Dan Mahaffee, along with all of you folks. Thanks so much for being with us. Thousands more than we had at the beginning of the year. That's pretty cool in season 7 of the FarrCast. We're grateful for that here at Thanksgiving, I assure you. Markets still trading near all-time highs. Stocks up 20% on the year. A lot to be grateful for there. Couple of weird things going on out in the market. Huge beat in earnings for NVIDIA. Stocks flat. It's been on a tear this year. Absolutely amazing. Keep an eye on some of these Magnificent Seven stocks. They're still pulling the market train, and they are a powerful locomotive. Sam Altman is back at OpenAI. You talk about just the most embarrassing public display of ineptitude and bumbling bravado on the part of a just really borderline qualified board. Really? Nobody does anything like that. You can't do that. And he's back, and his team is back, and they're going to push AI and ChatGPT, OpenAI, and backed, of course, by something like a $13 billion investment from Microsoft. So it's been amazing to watch this public display of a train wreck, and he's back, and the board is gone. So you are accountable, and it's very important to have a qualified board, folks, a really qualified, experienced business board. I think what we saw, very important, we saw a board make an emotional decision. I think we saw them persuaded by one very powerful personality, and they made an emotional decision. They got all whipped up, and he was saying, we've got to do this, and here's why, and here are the consequences, and there's no choices. And he kept talking, and he increased the pitch, and he increased the volume, and he increased the fervor, and we've got to go. And they went. Shame on them. Shame on them. So coming into Thanksgiving here, the yield on the 10-year Treasury is falling again. The Fed is on the sidelines, and there we go. At the end of my segment with my friend Jim Lebenthal, I mentioned treasure, and I just like to tell you how grateful I am for so many things in my life, and I want to tell you what I treasure. And I use that word treasure, and in the New Testament, and it comes from, not really in my head, but from the Gospel of Luke, and it's the King James edition, because it's much more poetic. It uses all the these and thous. I love all the these and thous. It's just so much more poetic. I understand it's less accessible, but I think the language is beautiful. You know that Robert Frost said if you didn't want to take the time to structure a poem and add verse to your poem, you didn't really care enough about what you were saying. And I always like that, because there is a melody in a poem that should reinforce the message of the poem. And it can be a very staccato kind of a difficult meter in poetry for a difficult message. And it can really be lovely and enticing, even seductive in romantic poetry, the meter, the rhythm. This is from the King James. Whether in heaven or in earth, there will your heart be also. The heart is always set upon the treasure, and as is a man's treasure, such is his heart. That is, set upon it. If his treasure is only here, and he has not the true riches, his heart is only earthly and carnal. But if his treasure is heavenly, and his heart and conversation, then his heart and conversation will be in heaven. So where is your treasure? And I think about the relationships in my life. I've been very fortunate, ladies and gentlemen. When I graduated from college, when I got out of Sewanee, I had a job teaching high school English at Pomfret School in Connecticut. And I had, it was somewhere like $1,100 or $1,200 in savings. And I didn't have any debt from my education, because my father, God bless him and keep him, who turned 98, a couple of weeks ago. Dad turned 98. He's doing pretty well. He took out loans. He took out loans to pay for my college. And there I went off to teach. And I made $10,500 a year plus room and board to teach 11th and 12th grade English and coach baseball, and basically worked 24/7 at a boarding school in Connecticut. And I thought I was the luckiest guy on earth. And I loved it. I had money for beer and gas. I could get on a plane for $300 and go somewhere every so often. Life was good. Life was good. 23-year-old single guy, feeling pretty important to be Mr. Farr and teaching Shakespeare. That was really cool. Pretty heady days for the 23-year-old. I never imagined the life and the family that I have been so fortunate to have. And I have now, ladies and gentlemen, treasure. I have wealth. It's wonderful. And it is not where my heart is. It adds certainly to the quality and comfort of my life. But what I care about are my dear friends and my family and the people I love. When I sit and visit with people, when I sit and talk and hear the stories of other people's lives, and this is a privilege that I have in managing money. It's one of the things I love about it. I learn about people's families. I learn about their careers. And when you're managing people's money, they call you and they say, we have an illness. There's a problem at the company. We're going to sell the company. I had a grandchild. My father passed away. I've inherited some money and I don't care about it because I'm so sad. My husband passed away and I've never dealt with money before. Can you help me here? Great privilege is spending those moments, those so important moments with other people at their important moments, to share in those moments of humanity and to be there and help and support and to share and to grieve and to share the pain as well as those joys of those new grandchildren and college graduations. And I sold my company and all of those other things. And we just had a marvelous trip. And you know, some of the most touching moments in my life lately, I've heard from a couple of students, former students, it's been 40 years since I taught, who have sent me notes and have picked up the phone and called me after 35 years and said, you know what, Mr. Farr, you made a difference. And I want to tell you what I was thinking about the other day about you. 40 years later, I can't even imagine it. But do you know what a great gift that is to me? And to remember those people as they were children. I don't know if you do this, folks, but when I am remembering a classmate from high school or from college, somebody says, do you remember that girl when we were in high school? Yes. And I'll stop and think, yes, I remember her. And when you remember them at 17 or 18. I would probably not, I'd walk by them on the street today, right? I wouldn't recognize these people who look as elderly as I do. It's just, it's such a tragedy. We're not, but that's the person I remember. And that's a person, what a gift, right? To know somebody that long, to have that history, recognizing that not only do they not look like that, they're not like that on the inside anymore. And almost all of them have grown and developed and matured and mellowed a bit with age. I sure as hell hope I've mellowed with age. Some of those sharp corners have been knocked off or beaten off or clipped off by me when recognized by me. That's a little bit harder, isn't it? But these are the treasures of my life. These are the relationships. Here's where I find meaning. So we protect people's physical treasure so that they have that insurance policy and can be kept safe and bulletproof from those financial threats. That's what we do. We offer financial security, maybe not. Sometimes we have marvelous performance. Sometimes we don't. Overall, we keep things moving in the right direction, and we make sure that folks are okay, and that they're okay as best as we can so that they can enjoy the treasures of their life, which I hope will never be monetary, I treasure you. I treasure my family. Laurie and I are coming up on our 35th wedding anniversary. What a treasure that is. What a treasure that is, to be married for 35 years. My children are now in their 30s. What a treasure and blessing they are. I still have my dad at 98 years old. Harry Jennings, our producer, was a student in my dormitory at St. Andrew's, Sewanee in 1982. 1982. Harry and I have known one another most of our lives. What a great blessing. My partners and friends at Farr Miller in Washington. If you're starting to get bored, I'll stop, because the list goes on and on and on, and I am that blessed. So on this Thanksgiving, please know that I am offering thanks to each and every one of you and to everybody in my life, and for the great gift of the talents and abilities that I have been given to provide care and support so that you can enjoy your treasure and I can enjoy mine, and we can build a little bit of it together. I look forward to building more treasure with you in the next couple of weeks and certainly the next few years. If we can ever be helpful, please reach out and give us a ring. Send Harry an email, hjennings@farrmiller.com. We'll be here for you. Thank you so much. We'll be back next week. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. For Farr Miller in Washington, the FarrCast and Hightower Advisors, with a very grateful heart, I'm Michael Farr.
That's a wrap for this Thanksgiving week episode of the FarrCast. Thanks to our guests this week, Jim Lebenthal and Dan Mahaffee. And thanks to you, our listeners. We're grateful for your support, and we hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. I want to reiterate that anytime we or any of our guests mention a specific company or refer to performance in relation to an earnings report or news headline, please be aware that it is not a recommendation to buy or sell. Review the risks and rewards of any investment with your financial advisor for what is appropriate for you before you make any investment decision. And as always, if we can be of assistance at Farr Miller in Washington, please reach out to me at hjennings@farrmiller.com. We are here to help, and I am happy to arrange for any of our listeners an appointment with one of our financial professionals to review your portfolio, your needs, and your goals. The FarrCast is produced by Michael Farr and Harry Jennings and comes to you weekly on all major podcast platforms, including Google, Spotify, TuneIn, and Apple Podcasts. Stream past episodes or subscribe so you never miss a new episode. We love reading all of your notes, and we try to reply to as many as we can. You can reach us at hjennings@farrmiller.com. Let us know any questions you have about past episodes or questions you'd like us to address in upcoming shows. We hope you have a great Thanksgiving and a great holiday season. Take care, stay safe, and stay healthy. We'll be back with you next week on the FarrCast, Wall Street, Washington, and the world. Farr Miller in Washington is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Some investment professionals may also be registered with Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities, LLC. All information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC have not independently verified the accuracy or completeness of the information contained in this podcast. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties, expressed or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions or results obtained from the use of this information. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates assume no liability for any action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to the information. This podcast and the materials contained herein were created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates do not provide tax or legal advice. This material was not intended or written to be used or presented in any way to any entity as tax or legal advice. Clients are urged to consult their tax and or legal advisors for related questions.